The gallows floated, silent and imperial, in the stratosphere of the gas giant Virex 4, swaying only slightly as the winds howled in colors no human eye could fully parse. A jellyfish of steel and bone, suspended on magnetic silence, its tentacles unfurled into platforms for ambassadors, observers, and bureaucrats too sacred or cowardly to breathe the same air as executions. Today was the day of glorious harmony. Incense curled like sentient fog around carved pylons made from extinct trees, exhumed from burial planets for ceremonial relevance. Somewhere below, the gas giant simmered, bands of pressure and ammonia storms rolling like warfare held in stasis. And at the center of it all stood a woman. She wore a plain gray robe, frayed at the sleeves. Her hands were bound, not in chains, but with diplomatic silk, embroidered with treaties that no longer applied to her. The fabric shimmered, as if still negotiating on her behalf. But the hangman was immune to such nuance. The crowd was a chorus of clicking mandibles, rippling gills, and scent pulses. Their languages weren't spoken so much as exhaled, tasted. They had come for spectacle, justice, and the relief of seeing a problem made vertical and breathless. A diplomat was about to die, a human one, and that meant it was going to be ceremonial. The Galactic General addressed the gathered masses with a voice like harmonized iron. Technically, it was a voice constructed from 17 different thought signals, routed through a translator orb embedded in its chest. It looked vaguely humanoid, if one squinted through a migraine, but only because the general believed in mimicry as a tool of control. This woman, the general intoned, did knowingly and with prejudice raise an eyebrow during our most sacred negotiations. Gasps. Some species without eyebrows hissed in confusion. She questioned the second pronoun, accord. She mocked the interstellar matrimony pact by laughing. And worst of all, she cited a clause not found in any of our approved scrolls. The crowd buzzed. No one used scrolls anymore. The last species to codify law on paper had been conquered by a word virus. But tradition demanded severity. The woman didn't speak. Her gaze scanned the horizon, watching the sun catch on the ceremonial hooks above her. She looked neither fearful nor proud, just finished. A light chime rang out. The verdict, pre-written, was read by a gold-plated slug that unfurled its legal tongue with bureaucratic delight. 176 counts of disrespect, 5 infractions of tone, 1 charge of overconfidence inconsistent with assigned species status. Her name was Amira Zell, Earth's senior diplomat. She had negotiated 57 treaties, saved 6 species from economic collapse, built peace where war had bred in the marrow. But today she had been declared culturally misaligned. The general stepped back. The rope, a vine actually cultivated from a plant that fed on regret, was lowered. It shivered as it touched her skin. A quiet breath left her. Amira tilted her chin, and for the first time, she smiled. The floor, beneath her feet, fell away. The crowd cheered. Horns bloomed. Gills flared. 1,000 alien dignitaries sipped from translucent cups filled with empathy extract and liquefied honor. It was over in 21 seconds. Her body swung once, then again, then became still. A breeze swept across the platform, carrying the sterile scent of justice and the subtler tang of a political mistake. For 72 hours, Earth said nothing. No ambassador wept. No protest arrived. Not a single human voice condemned or questioned the ruling. In the halls of the Galactic Senate, it became something of a joke. She was probably disavowed, snorted a Ractilian trade lord, her jaws full of jewel worms. Earthlings are always cleaning up their own mistakes. They'll thank us eventually, said a Dravi scholar, who had written a best-selling book on human inconsistency. You've seen their elections. Maybe they were embarrassed, someone whispered in hushed sarcasm. Lost control of their little mammal. No one realized the silence was deliberate until the courier arrived. It came in an old model drone, the kind humans used before they joined the galactic table. Scratched hull, blunt broadcast band, no flare. It emerged from deep orbit like an afterthought. It did not request permission to dock. It simply hovered outside the communication deck of the Galactic Senate and repeated a message in 473 galactic dialects. There was no intro, no flag, no anthem, no human face. Just 5 words. She was Earth's daughter. And then a second transmission. War is now permanent. It didn't specify targets. It didn't declare timelines. It didn't even name enemies. It merely stated a condition: permanent war. The message was authenticated by 9 separate AI truth cores. A 4th-generation Earth seal encrypted the signature. Unmistakable. The Senate descended into horror. "What does that mean?" shrieked a Zord diplomat, its eyes blinking in every spectrum at once. "It means they're coming," said a more seasoned ambassador. "Not now, not loud, but soon, always." A vote was called. Panic ensued. Emergency protocols activated. Across the galaxy, alliances shook. Armies rechecked old contracts. The Eldrim Republic sent feelers toward old Earth colonies, asking carefully if forgiveness was possible. The Mari clergy attempted a prayer in binary. It short-circuited half their temples. And in the ringed sky over Virex 4, where the gallows still hung silent, the crowd began to whisper that maybe the rope had frayed too soon. That perhaps the woman's smile had meant something. That perhaps it hadn't been surrender at all, but calculation. Across the floor of the dead platform, a single blossom bloomed from the vine rope's husk. It was not ceremonial. It bore earth scent, pine and storm, and it pulsed faintly, as if waiting for a heartbeat to return. Back on Earth, in a classified sector beneath the Himalayas, a room without lights or windows buzzed to life. Its only occupant, a woman with a faded datapad and a bullet lodged forever in her shoulder, stirred. She opened her eyes. She did not blink. "Permission granted," she said quietly. She stood and walked toward a suit that wasn't military, but wasn't civilian either. A patch on its shoulder showed a dead flower and a single star. She did not need to ask what came next. Somewhere far above, the galaxy reeled. And Earth, quiet, bruised, and unreadable, began to write a new chapter. Not with ink, not with speeches, but with consequences. The arena orbited a dead star that still insisted on glowing. It had no right to, physically speaking. It had collapsed a millennia ago, shrunk into a quantum ember of itself. But the architects of the Tournament of Celestial Correctness had insisted that a bit of ambient radiation added gravitas. And so the ruins of a once mighty sun served as a glowing pedestal for a blood sport disguised as diplomacy. The tournament was sacred, or pretended to be. It had started as a ceremonial test of martial interpretation between neighboring systems, a way to settle disputes without starting real wars. Now it was a spectacle of violence draped in ritual, an Olympic event if the Olympics had been run by lawyers and death cults. 78 species were represented this cycle. 79, if you counted Earth. Most didn't. The crowd arrived in swarms, literally, in some cases. Amphibious kings who ruled through scent, jelly skin traders who pulsed with tax-exempt pride, and floating monks whose blood glowed when they lied. They took their positions in the broadcast balconies, each species broadcasting the fight to their homeworlds in a format tailored to their biology. Visual, chemical, neural, or pure economic metaphor. Today's combatants would not just be fighting for honor. They'd be shaping the fate of entire diplomatic clauses. The tournament's core code was simple. Each match resolved a standing interstellar disagreement. Tariffs, mining rights, boundaries of cultural contamination. The higher the stakes, the bloodier the fight. And today's match? Personal. Everyone in the arena knew it. Because humans had never entered before. Never been allowed, technically. But loopholes were galactic currency, and Earth had cashed in quietly, coldly, and without fanfare. Which is why, when the combat gates peeled open with a hiss of ceremonial plasma, the crowd fell into a kind of unsettled murmur. Out stepped a woman, unarmed, uncloaked, unsung. She wore a simple combat suit, dark, unadorned, not even insignia. No glowing tribal marks, no telepathic winds trailing her steps. Just skin, cloth, and the weight of silence. Her name did not appear on the screen. Only her designation, Human Entrant 01. She walked slowly, not with arrogance, with calculation. The cameras found her face, pale with a healed scar beneath the eye. A datapad hung from her belt like an old priest's relic. And in her shoulder, barely visible beneath the suit's fabric, sat the glint of an old Earth bullet, lodged, left untouched, a keepsake or a warning. The alien commentators scrambled for details. Who was she? A mercenary? A soldier? Some accused Earth of sending a clone. Others muttered about sleeper agents grown in orbital monasteries. But the humans watching, those scattered few with clearance high enough to tune in, knew her. Juno Marrow, former diplomat, discharged from official service after the incident of 610 Rings, where an entire conference center had imploded 5 seconds after she was seen calmly sipping coffee on its terrace. Her name had never been officially linked. Earth's denial had been total and chilling. Now she stood in the center of the most watched arena in the galaxy, unarmed and unimpressed. Her opponent had not yet emerged. But the crowd was already stirring, a kind of anticipatory hunger rippling through them like the scent of wet thunder. Because Juno was human, and humans were funny, weren't they? Odd little creatures with bad posture and worse politics. But they'd never shown up for this. They weren't supposed to. They were diplomats, not gladiators. The gates shuddered again. Out came the executor. He was twice her height, 4 times her width, and carried gravity like a coat. His name was Claxton of the Supreme Axis, High Executor of the 17th Law. His body flickered in and out of visual consistency, part living crystal, part event distortion. Around him, the air bent, the rules flexed, and a faint sound like breaking ribs echoed every time he took a step. The crowd roared in frequencies that killed lesser insects. Claxton raised a cluster of arms and spread them wide in ceremonial contempt. He was the reigning champion of the tournament, a symbol of galactic justice, a creature who had legally decapitated ambassadors for poor handshake form. His victories were taught in schools. He gazed at Juno as if observing a strange animal at the edge of a hunting preserve. She blinked once. The announcers gave their speeches. In some languages, they were poetic hymns. In others, regulatory compliance notices. One species communicated solely through long silence, and thus held up the broadcast for a full 30 seconds. Then the terms were read aloud. Each combatant had agreed to symbolic representation of their people. Each action would have direct diplomatic consequence. Juno's victory, should it occur, would nullify the execution of Earth's diplomat and force a recalibration of the Galactic Accord's human clauses. Claxton's victory would codify Earth's submissive status for another 30 cycles. He curled one arm into a mockery of a bow. She tilted her head slightly in return. The rules forbade the use of direct energy weapons, reality disruptions, and species-specific pathogens. But everything else was fair game. The arena shifted. Gravity fluctuated. The floor morphed into a broken landscape of cultural metaphors. Obsidian stairs from the Eldrim tradition, sulfur lakes favored by the Exortal, a floating ring of teeth whose origin no one cared to confirm. They faced each other across a platform of memory stone, a surface that recorded every footfall for legal playback. Claxton moved first, not an attack, a demonstration. He condensed a sphere of localized pressure and crushed it between his hands, producing a pulse strong enough to topple planets. It bent the air, cracked the edges of the arena. Audience members with weaker nervous systems twitched violently. Juno didn't move. Instead, she took a single step forward. Just one. She adjusted her left boot and said in perfect galactic standard, "The last time I saw your kind, they were screaming the word context. You're about to understand it." Laughter burst from a few pockets of the crowd, confused and delighted. Claxton bristled, not from fear, but from a failure to dominate instantly. He lunged. Not fast, not slow, absolute. A motion that rewrote the floor beneath him. The arena screamed. Memory stone flashed red. Juno moved left, barely. The punch missed. By centimeters. But it didn't matter. The displacement field he generated should have obliterated her on proximity alone. It didn't. She'd thrown a tiny object, unseen, into his gravity envelope. A sliver of iron, metal from the ceremonial gallows where Amirazel had died. It disrupted his field by 0.03%. Just enough. He roared, voice splitting into 7 harmonic layers, each capable of inducing dread. Juno tapped her datapad. A projection appeared in the air. It was a slow-motion replay of Amirazel's execution, spliced with real-time footage from the Galactic General's speech. It was being beamed live to the screens above, to the broadcasters, to every species' legal archive. Gasps. No one had ever introduced forbidden footage into the tournament. It was unthinkable. But the rules didn't mention it explicitly, because no one thought anyone would dare. Claxton stopped. He couldn't strike during a sacred broadcast. Not even he. The arena's enforcement AI blinked, confused, then stalled. A glitch. Or maybe awe. Juno walked forward, placed a small scroll, a replica of Earth's diplomatic charter, on the center of his chest, right where his victory mark should have been. He hissed, every part of him trembling. She leaned in close. Not a whisper, but something worse. A promise. For her, she said. For every breath you wasted on condescension. She stepped back. Claxton did not fall, but he knelt. Because he had to. The rules of his species demanded honor in the face of unveiled truth. The crowd went silent, then ruptured. Protests, cheers, outrage, awe. The arena shimmered, with law being rewritten in real time. The broadcasters cut feed, then resumed, then tried to explain what had just happened. But the story was already writing itself. A human had entered the tournament of celestial correctness and changed the ending, not by muscle, but by meaning. And Earth had spoken without firing a shot. Juno Marrow turned her back to the crowd. She didn't raise her arms. She didn't smile. She simply walked toward the exit as the floor beneath her rewrote the future. The smoke machines were purely aesthetic, which made them all the more offensive. Juno stood in the preparation chamber, a glossy cell of chromatic tile and vibrating air, watching as the ceiling exhaled dramatic plumes that served no purpose other than to obscure. She remained still, eyes closed, one hand wrapped loosely around the strap of her datapad, the other tracing a silent line across her hip where her suit bore the faintest crease, evidence of age, of quiet repetition. The announcers had begun their pre-fight monologues above, for languages overlapping, a festival of ego and performance. One offered commentary in binary haiku, another wept openly into a bowl of scented oils to convey solemnity. It was meant to intimidate or overwhelm. Juno found it all exhaustingly loud. Across the chamber, a servitor drone hovered nervously, offering her ceremonial blades, blood capsules for flair, and a bottle of liquid fear imported from the Alaric moons. She waved it away. She had no use for theater. The walls trembled as her opponent made his entrance. She didn't look up, but she knew what they'd be showing on the screens. Claxton, radiant in his absurd glory, surrounded by his species' ceremonial mist, a fog engineered to trigger awe in any creature with a nervous system. That it was chemically addictive was beside the point. Awe was always easier to engineer than respect. His name was being screamed in every register, in scent trails, in pulse patterns, in colors visible only to deep-buried hive minds. The crowd adored him. He was history's favorite kind of monster, predictable, victorious, and loud. And Earth had sent a woman with a datapad. The arena door opened. Light and noise and burning incense spilled in. Juno stepped forward, each stride unhurried, as if walking through an argument she'd already won. The platform beneath her reconfigured in real time, reacting to the combatants' biosignatures. Memory stone pulsed beneath her boots, archiving every step in forensic fidelity. Claxton's side erupted into molten ledges and warped gravity wells, tailored to his abilities. Her side remained flat, empty, a blank canvas, waiting to be drawn in blood. He roared. It was not theatrical. It was tactical. The vibration carried data. Dominance, expectation, contempt. His roar had ended wars. It had ruptured ceasefires. Entire outposts had surrendered upon hearing it. Juno yawned. A small one. Not exaggerated. Not defiant. Just tired. The AI referee, hovering between them like a terrified bureaucrat, initiated the countdown. 5, 4. Claxton's limbs folded and unfolded in impossible geometry. Gravity spiked around him, compressing the air, warping the laws of motion. His shadow stretched across dimensions. 3. Juno rolled her shoulders, adjusted the tension in her neck, calculated wind vectors, listened to the crowd scream, cry, chant. All species, all voices, blending into the same noise. 2. The bullet in her shoulder throbbed. A reminder, a relic, a signal. 1. The horn sounded. He moved first. As expected. As always. A burst of compressed gravity shot from his limbs, tearing the arena in half. Not metaphorically, literally. The ground cracked, memory stones splintering into shards of historical data. To most, it would have seemed instantaneous. But to Juno, time had already slowed. She saw the angle of his approach, saw the ripple before his motion, saw the fractional delay in his forward vector caused by overconfidence and arena layout bias. She stepped left. The pulse passed her by half a breath. Her hair danced in its wake. He twisted, astonished that she was still there. She didn't give him time to react. A flick of her wrist sent a small object, a sliver of iron, no larger than a needle, into the gravitational field behind him. Not toward him. Into the field. It wasn't an attack. It was sabotage. The iron wasn't special, but it had mass. And gravity hates being interrupted. His distortion field hiccuped. For the first time in 100 tournaments, he stumbled. She moved then, fast and surgical, planting one boot against a jagged edge of the broken platform and launching herself upward. Not toward him, but past him, twisting midair. Her datapad activated in her palm. The screen flared. Above them, every broadcast terminal blinked. The feeds paused, and then rewound. Footage appeared of Mira, standing on the platform, calm, still, smiling, the noose tightening around her neck. The general's voice echoing, arrogant, bloated with self-righteousness. The audience went quiet. All of them. Claxton hesitated. Mid-turn. Mid-swing. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a representative. A creature bound by layers of ceremonial law. And he could not strike while sacred footage was being played. Especially not footage that had never been sanctioned. The rules did not permit emotional manipulation through historical documentation. But they also didn't forbid it. Because no one had ever considered the possibility. Juno landed. She stood beneath the hologram of the hanged diplomat and stared up at it, not with grief, but with promise. Claxton's limbs twitched. He could end her, footage be damned. Crush her into the stone. But that would mean dishonor. That would mean proving Earth right. So instead he trembled. Juno walked forward. The scroll was in her pocket. A simple thing, cloth-bound, marked with Earth's diplomatic seal. She placed it at his feet. "You don't know what you started," she said. "Not a threat. A truth. But we do. And we remember everything." He looked down at her. He had ended empires. Had killed gods. Had never once been forced to listen. She didn't make him listen. She made him stop. She stepped away. The footage ended. The arena didn't cheer. They didn't know how. A human had used memory. Had weaponized it without ever lifting a weapon. Had turned a fight into a mirror. And forced the galaxy to see what it had sanctioned. Juno tapped her datapad once more, locking the footage into the arena's memory stone. Now it was law. Now it was real. Claxton did not speak. But he bowed his head. A gesture. Ancient. Universal. Surrender. The referee stuttered. Tried to say something official. Couldn't. The AI flickered, overloaded with contradictions. Juno turned her back to all. As she walked toward the exit, the arena tried to decide whether she had won or whether they had simply lost. The smell of smoke lingered, but it was no longer from the machines. The Galactic Senate had never convened this quickly. It was designed not to. The very architecture of its star-choked bureaucracy required 1,000 approvals to approve a single motion to consider approval. Yet now, it hummed like a startled beehive, orbital, glowing, and seething with protocol being ignored in real time. Above the silvered dais, where species met in sacred squabble, floating chairs and biomechanical translation reefs glitched with the urgency of disbelief. Every species capable of emitting sound did so. The ones that communicated by telepathy clogged the shared mind sphere until the buffering lagged into psychic nausea. Even the quorum stones, silent sentient crystals that tracked the will of the assembly, flickered in erratic pulses of stress. At the center of this maelstrom was a single point of consensus. Earth had won. And worse, they'd meant to. They manipulated the broadcast, hissed a golden-chinned senator from the coalition of shared ashes. They didn't manipulate, growled the Zor Arbiter, who rarely spoke aloud. They revealed. No human was ever trained to fight in the tournament. This violates. Violates what? Interrupted a floating nest queen of the Ilark. Your pride? Or our illusion of control? The hologram was still replaying in the chamber center. Juno Marrow, the human entrant, stepping over cracked memory stone as the image of the hanged diplomat flickered above her. The symbolic scroll placed at Claxton's feet. The bow. The silence. Then her back, walking away. Unhurried. Final. It had triggered every fail-safe the Senate had built into the tournament's socio-political framework. Not because she cheated, but because she hadn't. And that terrified them more than violence. She used footage of an execution, muttered the Dravy scholar, whose feathers had molted with stress. An illegal tactic. No, came the voice of a legal construct, rematerializing midair like a ghost being called to court. It was never banned. Earth has always obeyed the letter of the law. 100 voices turned cold. Obedience, it turned out, was more dangerous than rebellion. It allowed humans to weaponize the rules themselves. A light flickered on the far wall. The room paused. A new signal had arrived. Unsigned. Unmarked. Plain. Just a data pulse with one phrase. We are still waiting for acknowledgement. Someone whispered, they're sending memos now. Another pulse followed. 5 seconds later. Each moment of silence shall be interpreted as authorization for escalation. This wasn't diplomacy. It was programming. Earth was declaring war with paperwork. Senator Halthrex of the treaty-forged conglomerate stood, all 6 of his eyes trembling. We must initiate countermeasures. Disable their systems. Block their network access. Freeze their trade. Something. No, said the Zor Arbiter again. You don't understand. You can't freeze Earth. They already cut themselves loose. All across the spiral arms of the known systems, humans had vanished from trade hubs. Human diplomats had gone dark. Earth's outposts, small, unremarkable, humble little stations with forgettable names, shut their gates. Some were found hollow, others full of carefully arranged data cubes with logs that read like final testaments. And in every case, no complaint was filed. No embassy stormed. No weapon fired. Just a quiet absence, like the door closing behind someone who left too slowly to be noticed. In the arena, the feed replayed again one last time. Amira Zell's hanging. The screams. Her faint smile. The general speech. Then Juno Marrow. The scroll. The silence. And then the line Earth had spoken days ago. War is now permanent. Senator Halthrex stared at that line and realized, with the slow, sick comprehension of someone who had always thought themselves clever, that the war wasn't being declared. It was being executed. Elsewhere, aboard an unmarked vessel moving between stars on paths unregistered by any known charts, Juno Marrow watched the replay on a small screen built into her bunk wall. The datapad rested in her lap, humming softly. A voice pinged in her earpiece. Earth command. Not a person, never a person now, just a protocol. Confirmation. Juno stared at the final frame of the broadcast. Not at herself. At the diplomat. At Amira Zell. hanging silent against the dawn of the gas giant. She nodded. Confirmed, she said. Begin messaging sequence. Phase 3. A pause. Then, execute on escalation. Juno leaned her head back, closed her eyes, and smiled faintly. No, let them stew. She rose and moved through the corridor of the vessel, boots soft against the carbon composite. Each door she passed bore a seal, not of rank or function, but of memory. An emblem etched with names. Not heroes, just people. Amira's was there, along with the 57 diplomats lost in incidents the Senate had quietly buried under technicalities and cultural misunderstandings. Juno stepped into the command chamber. A dozen others looked up, all in various states of silent prep. Some wore civilian garb, others battle gear. Some sipped coffee. One knitted. None smiled. They didn't have to. They were here. Update? She asked. One of them, an older man with a 1,000-yard stare and a map of lunar scars on his neck, gestured at the holoscreen. It's working. Senate's spiraling. Border fleets are repositioning, but no one's fired. They won't, Juno said, sitting. Not yet. They're too afraid of making it worse. Do they know it's already worse? They'll know soon. The screen lit up with new signals. Earth's autonomous diplomatic corps activating en masse. Thousands of dormant machines booting across forgotten satellites and embassies. Each one sending the same message. You hurt one of ours. That was not a mistake. Now watch what we do, without pretending anymore. The screen split. On one side, the Senate descending into frenzied motion, procedures colliding, alliances fraying like cheap fabric. On the other, a series of human operations previously classified, now resurfacing like old ghosts given flesh. Juno read the names. She hadn't seen some of them since the old wars. Not all were soldiers. Many weren't human anymore, not entirely. But all had been waiting. And all had remembered. Across the stars, small explosions began. Not on planets. Not on battlefields. On infrastructure. On communications relays. On trust. Senators received personal messages. Not threats. Memories. Footage of meetings. Treaties. Dinner parties. Diplomatic missions that had ended in betrayal. Carefully curated reminders of who had smiled while hurting Earth's children. A Chelm diplomat received a still image of a young girl smiling beside an embassy water fountain. She'd been 5. Her name was Anika Zell. The Chelm diplomat had signed her death warrant with a bored stroke of a pen. He resigned within the hour. Elsewhere, a shipping consortium AI shut down mid-sentence. The last word in its ledger, reckoning. Claxton awoke in his stasis chamber alone. He'd been removed from the arena after his collapse, not injured, but disgraced. His handlers had tried to spin it, to call it performance, strategy, cultural sensitivity. But no one believed it. He sat in the quiet of the chamber, gravity reduced, atmosphere tailored to his anatomy, and stared at the scroll Juno had left on his chest. It still hummed faintly. He hadn't opened it. Couldn't. Because if he did, he'd be accepting that the war had changed him too. Outside his chamber, riots had begun on 7 of his homeworld's colonies. Some were calling for truth, others for blood. The tournament had always been sacred, a pageant of power with predictable outcomes. But Juno Marrow had rewritten the script, not with violence, with patience. She hadn't defeated him. She'd revealed him. And that was worse. Back aboard the ship, Juno sat in the viewing lounge, sipping lukewarm tea. Another crew member joined her, a woman with braided hair and scars under her eyes. She said nothing for a long time. Then, how long before they begged for talks? Juno looked out the viewport. Stars passed like thoughts she didn't need to speak aloud. They won't beg, she said. Not yet. Not until they realize talking to us won't save them. The woman nodded. And when they do, Juno tapped her datapad once, opening the next stage of Earth's protocol. A list of names, faces, systems. At that point, she said, they'll be negotiating for forgiveness. And Earth doesn't do forgiveness anymore. Only memory. A new signal pinged on the console. A message from the Senate. Polite, measured, terrified. Earth, please confirm terms of engagement. We request. Juno closed the message without replying, then sent her own. You ended peace with a rope. This is just the echo. Across the stars, satellites woke. Old codes activated. Buried truths resurfaced. And a message, simple, sharp, and unbearably calm, flickered across the galaxy. Earth remembers. The war had already begun. It just wasn't shaped like the galaxy expected. No armies. No invasions. Just a relentless, patient memory. And Juno Marrow walking calmly through the chaos, carrying nothing but a datapad and the unbearable weight of knowing what they had done. The galaxy had mistaken silence for weakness. Now it would learn what silence could become.